Hello there, welcome back to Backyard Ballistics. Guess what? I've got another World War II relic. It's a German MP40, one of the most recognizable guns in history. The magazine you saw me removing was found separate from the gun, and I just jammed it in to make it more recognizable. This specific example was found together with the American firearms covered in my latest two videos, suggesting they were probably put together either by partisans or by somebody right after the war. Unlike the other three firearms though, this one doesn't show any sign of fire damage, but it seems to have shared the same decay environment with the same greasy canvas residues over it. I dare to say that this is the best preserved, or actually the least damaged gun of the lot. So I think it's worth trying to take it apart before acting chemically on the rust. First of all, I need to unfold the buttstock. Then I want to remove the handguard. It's made out of an early fiber reinforced plastic and I really don't want to take the risk of soaking it into a liquid that could stain it. What you see here is probably the most complicated recoil spring assembly that also houses the firing pin. We'll talk more about it later. Even the bolt handle is over-engineered and needs to be pulled outwards before it can move backwards. Why use one screw when you can get away with two? This was common on German guns. A smaller screw was used to prevent the accidental loosening of the main one. Might as well try to unscrew the grips. Original spares for these guns have gotten somewhat rare, so I want to do my best at saving as much as I can. As you know, my restoration efforts are often aimed at preserving guns as a part of history. Similarly, I like reconstructing and preserving my family history with the help of MyHeritage, the sponsor of today's video. MyHeritage is the #1 family history service and you can try it out for free at this link. First of all, it allows you to build up your family tree. I initially built mine from scratch, adding bits of information that I gathered and all pictures I found around the house. Then the website helps you recover more information about your ancestors that you probably thought was lost forever. MyHeritage guides you through a database of over 33 billion historical records, helping you find the ones related to your family. For example, here's the birth record of my great-great-grandfather who was awarded a gold medal in World War I. But the main power of MyHeritage lies in the ability of expanding family trees. When the algorithm finds a match between branches of two different family trees, it notifies the users and the trees can be joined. For example, I recently got a match on my beloved grandmother and joined my family tree with the one created by a distant relative of mine. And considering MyHeritage's 90 million users, this can go on forever, helping discover distant or forgotten relatives and preserving your family history for generations to come. They also offer picture improvement tools that proved quite useful in restoring and colorizing these old, tiny photos of my great-great-grandfather as he was deployed in Africa in 1896. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at the link below or by scanning the QR code on screen and enjoy all the features MyHeritage has to offer. If you then decide to continue your subscription, you'll get a 50% discount. Alright, let's go back to the gun and see if we can finally separate the steel parts from the rest. The bolt and spring assembly are well preserved, so I'll use a more conservative approach on them. All the other bits instead need to go in the chemical bath. After chemistry had done its job, I was finally able to take off the foldable buttstock. Okay, this is what we're left with. I'm reasonably convinced I could simply put it back together now and it should work, but I'd rather do something more to it. I want to get rid of some of the rust pitting, at least where it's most severe. And this is not only cosmetic. Very rough surfaces make it much easier for rusting to happen again. Also, the grip portion is full of holes and it feels awful to hold it in your hands. Welding tiny areas on thin material is no easy task with normal welders, so I'm using the micro arc welder by Lampert. It's tedious work, but you get no distortion and have practically no heat affected zone. This is me trying not to get my face melted by the UV radiation given off by the arc as I'm welding through the provided microscope while attempting to reverse the damage of 80 years of rusting. The barrel looked particularly bad, so I spent most of the effort there. It is made out of medium carbon heat-treated steel, so micropulse welding is really the only option. Any continuous welding would generate a large heat affected zone, messing with the heat treatment of the barrel. One side of the magazine well was also particularly bad, so I spent some time on there as well. And this is what we're left with. It's never gonna look new again, but I've filled the worst areas with steel. This is probably the most surface welding I've ever done on a gun, so it looks like it got measles now, but that's gonna be sorted soon. I also took the time to weld shut every single hole on the pistol grip portion. I'm not trying to make it look new again, it's never gonna look new again. I've also been extra careful not to weld or sand over any of the numerous markings found on it. This is the barrel before and after the treatment. Now, the observant viewer might have noticed I didn't weld on this nut. That's because it's made of free cutting steel, an easily machinable steel grade that is next to impossible to weld, so the cure would have been worse than the disease. Anyway, at this point I felt it was time to blue it. On stuff that was heavily rusted, I've found that rust bluing is a better choice compared to other techniques. First of all, it uniforms the texture of the freshly sanded areas with the original ones, and also allows bluing assembled parts without the risk for chemicals to remain trapped in the small spaces between them. In this case, for example, I couldn't get the barrel unscrewed without serious risk of breaking something, and I really don't want to risk leaving bluing salts under this nut. I found 3 passes with my favorite mix 24 hours apart give the best results. This is what it looks like now. The bolt didn't need rebluing, I just had to get rid of rust on the areas where it was exposed to the elements, and I did that in the simplest way possible, that is brushing with oil. To give it a good clean, I want to also remove the extractor and the over-engineered bolt handle. The spring assembly doesn't really need doing much to it, but I still want to take it apart to show you how it works. The firing pin is attached by means of a cross pin that I'm going to tap away gently. This gun works as a straight blowback firing from an open bolt, just like most similar designs of the time. That means they could have gone with a simple solution of using a fixed firing pin, just like most other countries did. Instead, the Germans made the firing pin a separate part attached to the spring assembly. Not only that, but look at the unnecessary complexity of this thing. This is it all taken apart. There are 2 springs involved, encased in a 3-segment telescopic envelope, plus a 2-segment telescopic guide rod. To put things into perspective, most other designs of the time only used 1 spring and 1 guide rod. Some even got away with a larger spring without any guide rod. But this is a German gun, enough said. Now, before I can put it back, we need to take care of the non-metallic parts, that is the handguard and grips. First of all, I want to get rid of the gunk on it. I tried scrubbing with soapy water first, but it didn't seem to be very effective, suggesting a non-polar solvent might be better suited. So I tried white spirits, same thing as mineral spirits in the US, and that worked very well, dissolving most of the grime. I did the same for the grips, where however I noticed some cracking on the backside. Since it seemed to be still pretty solid and I didn't want to make it any worse, I used the thinnest cyanoacrylate glue I have, making it seep into the cracks. You can even see it make its way to the other side of the grip in one spot. Once the glue is set, there is one final cosmetic issue to solve. The surface of both the grips and handguard looks washed out. That is not because of dirt or something left on the surface, but because of the surface itself. Aging caused some tiny roughness to appear on it, diffusing light and giving this lighter color look. I could polish the surface to get rid of the issue, but it's much easier to instead fill the roughness with a thin layer of finish. True oil works perfectly for this. Alright, time to put everything back and hope it works. These two spring-loaded plungers are necessary to keep the buttstock in position. A sharp blow, however, allows the springs to compress and the buttstock to reach the horizontal position, so the whole thing can be folded all the way to the front. At this point, the gun is in its field strip configuration, meaning we're almost done. In case you didn't notice, one screw is missing. Luckily this is a German gun though, so it'll work just as well without it. It was about at this point though that I realised something was missing. Remember the magazine? That's beyond repair. Luckily I have another lot of guns in storage with a spare magazine. But will it look too new compared to the gun? Of course not. All of the stuff I have in storage looks like this. A few hours later, here it is. Definitely not new, but it matches the rest. Alright, the very last thing to do now is see if it works. So, the gun is loaded, safety off, and all I could get was jams. I figured out the issue was the lips of the magazine were a bit worn out. Who would have thought, right? Luckily I had my trusty lamp hammer, so I adjusted them with some slightly unorthodox means, effective nonetheless, that were luckily captured by a friend of mine that thought somebody whacking a magazine with a lamp hammer was unusual. But guess what? It works now. Before leaving you, I want to give a final thanks to MyHeritage for sponsoring this video. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at the link below or by scanning the QR code on screen and enjoy all the features MyHeritage has to offer. If you then decide to continue your subscription, you'll get a 50% discount. Once again, a huge thanks goes to my patrons, which as usual are all listed here. Thank you all for watching, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you next time. Bye.